Welcome to ISOL 531 Access Control. As we know, with everything going on in the world, more and more people are working from home. And what does that mean? We've got to make sure we know who they are, who logs into our system, and what access do they have. So we're going to take this class as an overview of all that. We're going to start with Chapter 1, Access Control Framework. What makes access control actually work? So, our learning objectives and key concepts. Learning objectives define access control and identity management concepts. Our key concepts, principal components of access control, identification, authentication, and authorization, the three pillars that make up access control, which we'll discuss. Logic, access control, and authentication factors. These are all components that we want to start evaluating as we're going forward. So, what is the framework? Access control. The overview of what it actually is grant and restrict users access to information systems and other resources. Right? Not everyone has access to everything. So, access control is about giving the user the material they need to do their job, no more and no less. And we'll see that more as we go along. So, what is access control systems? Implement business rules. This is what the company's decided we need. It's all written out. We're going to direct policy and implementation. Allow, and this is an important part of it, allow individuals access to information and resources necessary to perform their job, but no more. If they need access to a certain system, that's what they get. And within that system, we want to even control what applications they can use within the system. So it's not a free-for-all. We don't just open up the systems and let anyone have it. We really want to control what they can see and do. So access control, what does access mean? Businesses, we need to protect the data, systems, network, and network bandwidth and other assets. So we're going to look into that. What is access control? How do you lock virtual doors to protect them? So this is what we're going to be looking at. How do we get sure that the people are getting their data that they need to do their job without compromising it, without having any extra issues? And what is that virtual door? Well, today everyone's working from home. Well, we got to look into this and figure out how do we get people working from home to do what they need to do with the tools that they need. And we want to make sure they are who they say they are and that they're protecting the data on their end also. So there's a lot going on. Access, the ability of a subject and object to interact. Pretty simple. Someone wants to get in, even if they're in the office, they have to get to a certain database or whatever the case may be. What is access control? Based on the formalization of those rules for allowing and denying access. Defines allowability, interactions between subjects and objects, based on granting rights and privileges with respect to those objects. So that's all we're looking at. We want to make sure that they can do what they do when they need to do it. What is identity management? Identity management is a process of creating, maintaining, and revoking users' accounts. Provides the mechanism used for authentication. Identity and access management. Authentication allows you to confirm who the person is they claim to be, and authorization allows you to restrict activities to authorized actions. So all we're talking about is, are they who they say they are? What access do they have? This is what we want to be looking at. So we start with policies. These are the rules that govern who gets access to which resource. As I mentioned, not everyone has access to everything, so we're very limited on who we can give access to. Subjects, the users, network, processes, applications, requesting access to resources. This is anything that we need. Who can get into our network, who can print, who can get data, what processes, what applications are stored on our access, on our network that we can limit who's in there. And the last one is objects, resources to which subject request access. So our databases and all that. Access control. So we have the policy. This starts with the statement of business requirements regarding access to resources. What does our policy say that new users do? How many managers have to sign off before we give it to them? So policies are what we follow to make sure if someone new hired, how many days do we get before they get their computer? If an employee's left the company, how long do we have to activate their accounts? And we have the procedures. These are non-technical methods used to enforce the policies. One of the things we use a lot is checklists. So if you had an employee that was hired, it had to be approved by the manager, the immediate manager, and the department manager before they can get access to systems. If the person left, it would come, IT would have to get this procedure in place. Tools, these are technical methods used to enforce the policy. And we use these. Organizations use procedures and tools to enforce it. So we have our policy in place that says a new employee needs to have this, that, and the other thing. The procedures are the document that might be used, checklist, and a technical method is the system itself, going in and granting rights, creating new users. These are what we're looking at. Access control. So this here this is one of 3, authorized. Authentication, credentials present and approved. So who is it? Most of the time this is simple, login and password. Unauthorized, authentication credentials presented but not approved for access. So they put the wrong password in. Unknown, authentication credentials have not been presented. So this is someone who's trying to hack in. They really don't know the password. So these are the different areas that we want to look at. Components of the AAA security. Authentication ensures users are who they claim to be. Authorization ensures an authenticated user is allowed to perform the request action. And accounting maintains records of actions performed by authorized users. So these are the 3 areas that we're going to be evaluating and making sure that everything's there. We want to make sure the users are who they are, they got in with their correct credentials, and we're maintaining where they're going. So some subjects we want to look at that they can get access to, technical resources. The network itself. Can they even log on? We want to make sure that they are who they say they are. Can they get access to the systems, the different processes we have on there, and the applications? Again, just because we have all these applications on our network doesn't mean everyone has to use the same application. Just like you don't want accounting applications being used by marketing or sales, being used by HR. So you want to make sure we limit who has access to what. So let's take a look at the 3 access types, right? The main categories of object protected by access control. Information. This is any type of data. And this is what hackers want. They want information. So this is an important thing that we make sure we maintain. Technology, application systems and networks, and the physical locations. We're going to even look at controlling who can get in and out. Does the company have a security guard? Do they require badges? These are some of the things we want to look at. Information. Most common asset in the terms of IT access control. This is what we're trying to protect. And then the physical security. The process of ensuring no one without proper credentials can physically get into the building, can physically get into the server room. Everywhere I've worked, the server room was always under lock. You had to have a password, or your badge had to be pre-approved. We don't just let anyone into the server room or into the building. We have cameras and all that we're going to look into more about. So, how do we get our access control process? Identification. First step, subject presents credentials to access the control system. Is it a badge, a login, password? They might have tokens, which we'll talk more about. Authentication. System verifies that they're on the list and validates the subject's identity. If they're using a card with a picture on it, it's pretty simple. If it's a login password or biometrics, that's a second authentication. And then we have authorization. It passes the first two. It grants them access to the area that they need. No more, no less. If they don't meet the first two, then they're denied access to the object. And we try to make sure this is, across all materials. Here's a simple thing. My name is Bob Jones. Let me see proof, my driver's license, and they can enter. So, usually we have a badge for new employees or some kind of sign-in sheet if you're a thing. But this is simple explanation on how it looks. Identification, who are you? Verify who you are. If it's good, you get in. I'm sure most of your companies have some kind of setup. The first step is identification. So what is identification? How do we access this? Is the first step, right? Systems applies to labels to subject and object. Subject labels, user ID, email, employee ID, or something else. Object labels that we might have access to. Printer 1, 2, or network. Universal labels might be assigned to remain a life of interaction. Unique labels provide accountability. Correlate subjects with actions when used with the system's logging facility and authentication systems. So, authentication builds upon the identification by requiring the subject to prove who they are. So, authentication factors, something you know. Your login. So you're going to have a password, phrase, shared secret, a PIN number. Something that's in your mind to retain. Something you have. It might be a token, smart card, ID badge you have to put in. Or something that you are. Biometric, iris scanning, fingerprints, or something on that order. Cadence. This helps us with the authentication process. So here's an iris scan. This is becoming much more popular. It's easier to do. You can set it up, fingerprints, scanning. These are just easy things that companies are starting to do. Authorization. Set of rights defined for the subject to use based on the subject's identity. That is key. And they only can see what they see. Rules can be made simple or complex, balance between secure complex systems and more administrative work for inconvenience. And as you can see, there's a balancing act. It's much easier to give someone access and say, here, go do what we want. We trust you. But that's not reality. So if there's multiple systems they need to log into, they might have to log into the system 2 or 3 times to get where they want. But it helps us keep the data secure. So there is a balancing act that we have to follow. Logical access control, tools used. We talked about identification, authentication, authorization. These are the concepts that we follow. Logical areas. Who? Identify the subject. What? Type of access being requested. When? The time of day or week this request is being made. And that's something we haven't talked about yet, but we can actually lock our system down. If someone works 9 to 5, we can give them access to the system 9 to 5. If they log in at 2 in the morning, well, that's a red flag. So we can do some of these different things. Where are they physically at the thing, or is it going to be remote? And what type of, and how, type of access that can be granted to the subject. Not everyone should be working remote if they don't have to. All right, logical access control for subjects. Administration rights, able to read, write, create, and delete files. Author can read and write their own files. Read only, read but not edit, and no access. So when we're looking at saving documents and different levels of security, these are the basic levels that we have. Administration usually has complete rights over the system to be able to make fixes and troubleshoot. Author can only really play with their files. Read only is if I'm going to send that to someone. And if they don't have it at all, they shouldn't have access. Now, we can also do something called group-based access control. So I create a department. Everyone in this department has access to these rights. So it's efficient. Makes it simple. I don't have to give every single person individual rights to a folder or to a document. Effective in large organizations, clusters of individuals, such as departments, roles, and this. So I can have in my accounting department, all my accounts payable people are in one group. They get to see everything. My accounts receivable, they get to see all their work. You can't see each other. But all the managers can see both. So I can have multiple groups. This is just an easy way to do it, to create these clusters. And access level can be assigned to the group as a whole. So everyone in each group gets that rights, except the managers might be in a separate group so they can see other things. We can also set it up so individual members of the group with some different levels of access, but that requires a little bit more work. And again, if it's a requirement would we want to do this. And then this helps us simplify management of the rules. So we know everyone in the same department has the same access. All right, let's take a look at logic controls for objects. So we have the data element. That is the lowest level. And we have the different tables. The data element can be a name and address of a user. The table is made up of multiple of these. The database is then made up of all the different tables that are there and then linking it together. The application is then connected to that. That controls the database over the top of it. And on top of that, we have the system or network, or the system that's running. Then we have an operating system, which is either Unix, Linux, Windows, or Macs. And on top of that is the network. This is how everything works, starting with the basics of the data element. And then we just build upon it going upwards to the highest level. So here's a simple user. The file's on our server. Simple user logs into the network through the object to the server, and then it gets the object that they need. Authentication factors. Something you know, something you have, or something you are. So most authentication systems start with at least a username and password. Now we're looking at working from home, a lot of people, I know my son uses this. He has a two-factor authentication. First his login and password. Once he passes that, they will have him log in, and now with a token or something on that access to highly sensitive data combines the first two factors, and the most sensitive are all three factors. So something you have is a token, and something you are is your biometrics. So it's very common today to have the first two. You can even set up your Amazon every time you log in to get a verification code. Something you know. Well, passwords are the easiest. Easy to use and remember, but easy for malicious users to guess. So you want to make sure your password is unique. Create stronger passwords. Use passphrases. Set minimum character lengths. Require upper and lowercase. Require numbers and punctuation marks. Use separate passwords for work and personal account. These are some suggestions. We're going to talk a lot about passwords in the upcoming weeks and the importance of them and what makes good passwords. So, something you have, a token. And if you can see in his hand, he has a token or a device that he has to put his card in to make sure it's who it says he is or she is. Physical tokens or devices. Time variable tokens, automatically change passwords. They're going to rotate every 30 seconds. So you put in your login, your password, you go to the next screen, you have to put your token ID in, and that token is constantly changing. Or you have a challenge response to your token. So these are some of the different things that we use. Something you have, here's your authentication token. As you see, it's constantly changing. And as you see, the numbers are changing every few minutes. And that's all we're trying to show you. And the same thing. Requiring multiple push authentication requests from Duo to user smartphone. Something you are. Biometrics, your fingerprints, your retinal scans, hand geometry, and facial recognition. Reliable and unique individuals. You're the only one with your fingerprint. So people are using that. Behavioral biometrics. This is something new that we're looking at. Actually, it's been used around. Speed of your typing in your login and password. Your writing rhythms. Voice recognition. Requires training so you can repeat that. Facial recognition at the airport's used. So these are some of the different things on who you are that we need to that are being adopted. Summary: principal components of access control: identification, authentication, and authorization, logical access control, and authentication factors. These are all made up and what we're trying to get you to accomplish. Thank you.